And that's why it's important for us to know that we're not the order takers, right? We
Right.
are there to probe and elicit requirements, right? We're not just there to give them what they want. We have to challenge that. All right. Welcome, everyone. Susan, it is so good to have you today to talk about going from invisible to getting promoted as a business analyst. So, this is an exciting conversation. I know you have a lot of experience managing business analysts throughout your career. So, this should definitely be a valuable conversation for our viewers. So, we're just going to jump right in today to talk about the problem of invisibility. And in your book, The Visibility Factor, you talk about how to become a leader by gaining visibility. Can you talk about what it means to be invisible in the workplace, especially as a business analyst?
Well, in my experience, I think where it starts is that you hold yourself back from asking a question in a meeting. You might hold yourself back from volunteering to lead something. And I think as a business analyst, you really have an opportunity to take that and use it as a vehicle to let people know more about you and the value that you bring and how you think about things. So to me, when people aren't being visible, and I definitely had this challenge myself, it's my story's first chapter in the book of where I wasn't being visible. And I think it happens to so many people where they're not even realizing it's happening. They just start to play small and they start to hide a little bit between what other people are doing or what they might think about themselves. And so they hold themselves back. And I think, especially for a business analyst who's trying to really move the needle on this project that they're working on and let people see them, it can really be detrimental for them.
Yeah. So why do you think so many business analysts do feel overlooked, especially when they're doing good work and they're productive? Where does that feeling of getting overlooked come from?
Well, there's a lot of reasons for it. And it's
Yeah.
not just business analysts. Unfortunately, I wish no one had this experience. It does happen to everyone at some point in their career. But I think a lot of times it might be a triggering event, like someone says something to them that, oh, you put together this use case, for example, and they're like, that wasn't very good. We need to do better. They weren't really trying to be critical. They were just saying we need to do a better job, but maybe how they said it wasn't the best. Well,
Right.
now that business analyst might hold on to that feedback and say, oh, well, now I'm not good at building use cases or putting together documentation, or they'll second guess themselves. So sometimes it's something very simple that someone says that you take to heart and you hold on to instead of just recognizing that that person was just saying something. It's not about me specifically, it's about how could we make this better. So I think
Yeah.
something like that happens, but you also have a lot of conditioning in society and in the world about how you're supposed to be, quote unquote. And I think people also are in comparison a lot, and so they're always trying to be like someone else. And what I
Yes.
would love people to do is to recognize that they have a lot of unique strengths and abilities, and how can they embrace those and start to share those more and stop
Yeah.
trying to be like everyone else, because that's what makes you more visible is when you stand out.
Yes, absolutely. Standing out is so key. I think for me, and my interaction with other, project roles and things like that, one of the things that made me feel invisible was not getting invited to something or
Mm-hmm.
hearing that a group of stakeholders or project team members had some type of meeting and I wasn't invited, or when I asked about it, maybe they said, "Oh, well, you didn't need to be there." So it's kind of like a polite way of saying, "Oh, well, you're not going to add any value to the conversation, right?" And that
Correct.
always would make me feel a little bit overlooked or invisible. So then I had to go through the process of trying to prove where my value was in that particular type of situation. I can
Mhm.
add value even though it's a more design focused discussion or a more technical focused discussion. So just that not feeling needed can add to that being overlooked or invisible type of feeling. Would you say that there's a confidence issue that comes along with that, or are there other organizational factors involved in feeling invisible?
Well, confidence is a big piece of it. I think when you're not confident, you can't show up in your best way and you tend to hide a little bit. And, to your example there, I had a person who I think I was 3 days into managing business analyst, and she came to me and said, Sue, they don't want me to come to this meeting I said, "What are they talking about? Why, of course you need to be at that meeting." She said, "They said I can't come." And so I said to the person who's leading the meeting, "Why can't she be there?" "Well, because we don't need her to be there. We're going to make the decisions." And I said, "Do you want your project to come out well or not? Because if you want her to come out well, you need her to be there to document, but she's also going to ask you the hard questions that you need to hear." And I think it's this place of not representing and understanding maybe the importance of a business analyst role. That's why I love what you're doing, because you are bringing to the forefront how important this role is and how it can make a difference in a project and in an organization. The more people who understand what a business analyst does and the value that they bring, it just helps everybody want to be a part of it. So sometimes I think it happens because people don't understand the role. And so I felt like part of my job as leading the business analyst group was to do a lot of public relations for what the group was doing and why they were important
Yeah.
and what value they brought. So I think there's just a lot of that that happens, and it's unfortunate. I've seen it a couple times in my lifetime, and so I don't know. That's why I think what you're doing is really shining a light on the value of this role and how it can be even more important than other roles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for many of the organizations, I've only worked at a few organizations because I typically get hired and try to stay there for a while. But one of the challenges for that role has always been to reorient that organizational culture of the IT team over here, the BA over there, and trying to get myself integrated with that so that I was involved in those meetings and things like that, where I felt that I should have been at,
Mhm.
as well as to invite other roles. Do you feel like you need to be a part of this meeting that we had and maybe you weren't invited to? Or are you invited to too many meetings? I think there is an element of choice there, right? Because some people hate meetings and they're like, I don't need to be here. And they might feel that because they don't like meetings or being involved in certain powwows, that other people don't care. But it's like, I care. So give me
Mhm.
that choice, and let me make that decision of whether or not I think I should be there, and then we can see whether or not the value is there.
Yeah, it's
So
like being inclusive of all the people who need to be in the room. Because the worst thing that can happen, and this happens a lot too, is someone's not there. And
mm,
then you put out the documentation and start talking about decisions that were made. Like, I didn't know anything about that. Well, you didn't come to the meeting. You would have
yes,
known about that had you been at the meeting. So
exactly.
it helps that kind of go into the background when everybody's in the room. And I think part of that is just setting expectations. We are having a meeting today where everyone needs to make a decision. And
Yeah,
so all of the key players, or send someone who can make a decision in your place, needs to be in the room. And it
absolutely.
just helps everything move forward. Otherwise, you're just that's the part I think I struggled with the most, is like my business analysts were always trying to find someone to talk to get information or to get a
Yes,
decision. And like they're
yes,
chasing people all the time and they don't have time for that.
exactly. Oh my goodness, that was probably one of the things that I dreaded. It was like
Hmm.
finding that person, but I'm a pretty good investigator, so I typically
Yeah, I
found.
bet.
All right, awesome. Okay, so let's talk about the visibility shift and why it matters. So, in terms of career advancement, how does visibility relate to that? Getting promoted, getting more senior level roles, and things of that nature.
Well, for any leader, when you first start out, performance is one of the most important things, right? Because they need to see that you can do the job. But at a certain point, once you've mastered some performance and you've demonstrated success, you need to start to show more, which means
Yeah,
you need to be in front of people so that they can see you. You need to talk about the results you're getting. You need to think about your own personal brand and your image. And is it the personal brand and image that you want? So there's a book by Harvey J. Coleman called Empowering Organizations, I think is the name of it, The Organizational Game Revealed. And in that book, he has a pie chart, which I refer to in my book. And in that pie chart, it says 10% of career success is based on performance.
yeah,
10%. I thought it was more like 80% before I learned
yeah.
this.
You would think,
And image is 30% and exposure is 60%. So
wow.
once you get to a certain level, if you're not talking about what you're doing and making sure that your image matches what you want it to be, well, then no one's thinking about you. Nobody is thinking about the work that you're doing unless you're talking about it. And because everybody's so busy right now, too, it doesn't help, right? Because your manager may or may not know what you're doing. So, what I talk about in the book is not bragging. not being overly self-promotional. It's about how to talk about your results in terms of facts and here's what happened and here's how I could help. It's just putting your voice out there and finding ways for people to understand what you've done and accomplished. So to me, it is crucial, and everybody that I've worked with has really started to gain confidence then because of it. Because you start to show up differently when you feel differently and you're getting the respect that you deserve and people can see your value.
Yeah. And that kind of sounds a lot like what would happen when someone is visible at work, right? You start to see
Mhm.
that you're treated differently. Outside of the things that you just spoke about, are there any other ways that professionals are treated differently once they are visible at work, or ways to know that you're becoming more visible at work?
Well, it's interesting because you feel it first, right? You're doing different actions, you're thinking about yourself differently, and so you're gonna feel it first, and then you're just almost paying attention, watching, observing. Did someone invite me to a meeting that I've never been invited to before? That's interesting. Did someone ask
Yeah.
me to come to a meeting or ask my advice? That's never happened before. So, what you're doing is you're creating this confidence that people can see and feel, and you have to do it with consistency and intentional actions all the time so that they don't think it's a one off, that they don't think you just did it this one time and it's no different than normal. But once you start doing that, you'll start to see how they start doing things differently and including you in things. And then you just keep doing more and more of it. You keep taking new actions. And it's a really fun process to watch my clients go through it now. And I'll say to them, just try this. Let's just try this because we want people to see your value and they can't see it
Yeah.
if you don't show it.
Yes. And you know what? It's interesting that what you said about you'll feel it. And I can recall a time in my career, or just some particular instances where I would say something like to a project manager, like, "Oh, I can't make the meeting, but you all still go." And they're like, "No, if you're not there, I don't want to have the meeting." And I'm just like, "Wow!" Like,
Love.
I love that, right? Okay. And it adds a little bit of pressure. So I was like, okay, well, now I have to, figure out some time frames and things like that. So when I started seeing things like that or hearing people make comments like that, that made me feel like they see me as a contributor, a valued contributor to this
Yes.
situation. So I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's a
So
great
yeah, you
feeling, right?
yeah, you can definitely feel the difference for sure. And in having that visibility, how do you balance? Because what you said earlier about not being like, braggadocious or, boasting or things like that. What are some misconceptions about being visible when you don't want to appear boastful or political when you're trying to gain that visibility?
I mean, there's a line, right, of being too visible, maybe. But I think if you are coming from a genuine, authentic place,
Yes.
I would tell people not to worry about that because who you are is not going to change. It's
Right.
more about the words you say and how you show up. And I think there's that concern of, oh my gosh, they're going to see me as somebody who brags because that may be all you've ever seen. That's
Yeah.
all you know.
Yeah.
And I think people can tell a difference, right? Between someone who's in it for them versus being in it for the rest of the organization and their team and doing the right thing for the business. And so I've always said, you're never going to be too much, right? You're just going to be in a place where you start to show up differently and you start to feel differently. And that's the important part.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you have managed BAs before. I want to shift to talk a little bit about some visibility strategies for business analysts specifically.
Okay.
And I think everybody knows that in the business analyst role, meetings are very important. So, what role do you say that meetings play in building visibility for business analysts, and how can we contribute more effectively at those meetings?
Meetings are, I think, is a good first place to start because that is an opportunity for you to ask questions, for you to tag onto someone else's comments, right? Someone might say something and you're like, that's a great point. I was thinking the same thing, right? You can
Yeah.
say something that tags onto someone else's comment. The other place that I like to leverage meetings is what I call a visibility partnership in the book. And
Mhm.
that is, let's say that you and I, Michael, are going to be in a visibility partnership and I'm a little shy and you're much more extroverted than I am, but you're
Mhm.
also looking for visibility. And so you might be, Michael, I'd love to hear you talk about that. Well, you kind of have the invisible mic, if you will, right? That you're speaking into. And then what you do is you say, Sue, I think you should share the thing that you told me the other day. That was brilliant. Why don't you share that now? So
Oh,
you're
yeah.
helping me get visibility just by kind of passing the mic over to me, so to speak. And
Yes.
then you and I could also continue that outside of the meeting. I could talk to people about the things that you're doing in your work. You could talk to people about things I'm doing in my work. Because when someone highlights something you're doing, it means so much more because it's coming from someone else. I want you to be able to do it for yourself, but of course, it's a great way to do it, for someone else and get them some visibility into what they're doing. So, those are
Yeah.
some simple, easy ways to just get started because I know it may not be something that people are used to doing, but I used
Yeah.
to have a 4 or 5 questions I thought might come up that I could ask, key points that I wanted to make sure that someone heard. If we didn't get to that question, I would bring it up. Just starting to recognize that you matter, your voice
Yes.
matters, what you have to say matters. And I think for a long time, I had imposter syndrome
Oh
and
my God.
did not believe that what I had to say was important or that it mattered. So
Yeah.
I want everybody listening to know that your voice matters, what you have to say is important. And the reason this helped me, I hope it helps you as well, is when someone said to me, you were hired for a reason. And if you're not sharing information and your leadership makes a bad decision, that's on you. And
Yeah.
I thought, oh my gosh, of course, right? That makes total sense. So I was
Yeah.
so in my head about how I was going to ask a question, what I was going to say, was it going to be okay, that I
Yeah.
just shut myself down before I could say anything. So I hope that helps anyone who's listening who might be in that position. Just
Yeah.
recognize that you need to speak up.
Definitely. And I love the point you made about helping someone else be more visible. And I think that's a part of being a good facilitator too,
Hmm.
as business analysts, especially, if we're doing like a workshop or a elicitation session, to recognize when people are more or less active in a meeting, especially when there's kind of like a hierarchy involved,
Yes.
where there's like a vice president or, in frontline workers or end users, they might be a little bit intimidated to share their ideas. So I think for me, I would be very intentional about calling them by their name and saying, such and such, what are your thoughts on XYZ or such and such? Can you explain this process to me so that when, they're called upon, they have their moment at the mic, I guess I would say, without
Hmm.
feeling that pressure or that should I say it or should I not, type of situation. So I try to do a little bit of a round robin to make sure that everyone's participating.
That's
Um,
great.
and that can really make them feel visible, like, wow, I was able to contribute at this meeting, and that could boost, their confidence, in other ways.
Yeah, I mean, that's creating psychological safety for someone to feel comfortable to speak up. And if you don't feel safe, you're never going to speak up in the room, or if you feel like you're
Yes.
going to get judged or criticized. So I think it's incumbent upon who's ever facilitating a meeting and also maybe managers of teams to find ways to make sure that everybody has a voice in the room, whether that's the round robin approach, which I love, or saying at the end of the meeting, I want to hear one key takeaway from each person. And sometimes what
Yeah.
I'll do is the people who are more introverted or shy, I'll let them go last. So I'll pick other people so that way they have some time to think about it and they can hear other ideas, which may then spark some ideas for them. So that is what I have done. And I think it helps people feel more comfortable. And then after, I will call them and say, oh my gosh, I was so excited to hear what you shared today. I cannot wait to
Yeah.
hear what you share next time. So I'm
Yeah.
reinforcing that their voice matters.
I
So
love that.
sometimes it's incumbent upon a person who's leading the conversation, I think, to help give a little nudge, if you will,
Yes.
to help people continue to do it.
Oh, I love that, giving them the positive reinforcement for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, I remember a situation where we had some stakeholders and we had subject matter experts that were more high level. And one day the subject matter expert was not able to attend. So I think he sent a team lead or some role that was a layer lower to the
Hmm.
meeting, and the contributions were great. So we were like, hey, that the information they provided was great. So let's include this person as a recurring project team member. I'm sure that was something that they were like, really? Wow, that really made them feel acknowledged, right?
Of
So
course. Yeah, that's
you do find
amazing.
that
Yeah.
for sure.
And it gives someone else
Uh,
a chance to shine, right? That person
yeah,
may not have ever had that opportunity. So it's good for the
yeah,
manager to know, hey, I don't have to go to this. I can send this person and
yeah.
they're doing a great job. It reflects well on the manager too.
Mhm. And another practice that I do sometimes is when I have a wide variety of couples and things like that, sometimes I'll kind of explain why I have you there. Like
Hmm.
this group of people I want because they're the decision makers. I have this group of people because they know the detailed processes. And this is the group of people they're going to know the technical impacts of that. So everybody can kind of have that feel, okay, so that's why I'm here,
Yeah.
so they can know how they can contribute. And of course, they're not boxed into that, but it does give them that level set of, so they don't have to ask, like, okay, why am I here? Why am I at this meeting? So I'm just letting you know up
Yes,
front, this is what I want from you.
exactly. Be prepared.
Prepared, exactly, for sure. Okay, so you mentioned earlier about talking about the effects of your contributions. So, how do you think that business analysts can showcase their work and the impact of that work?
I think a couple things would work. Maybe the first one might be now it's been a little while since I've been doing business analyst stuff, but if memory serves, the big things are you're trying to get agreement, right, with a lot of people and get to a place where you can all feel comfortable with whatever the requirement is to take
Yes.
things forward. So if I'm in a room and I'm working with a tough group of stakeholders and I have the conversation and we actually get to a decision, that's a big
Mhm.
win, right? And if
Yeah.
I'm facilitating that conversation, it's a big win for me. So
Yeah.
then that's an opportunity to take that back to your manager or to take that back to whoever, maybe, someone who wasn't in the room who needs to know that, some
Yeah.
other influencers in the group. So it's sharing, hey, this conversation has been going on for months. And I
Yeah.
am so
Yes.
thrilled
Exactly.
I'm so thrilled today that we got to agreement on this big requirement that we have. And now
Yeah.
that's going to have a ripple effect on everything else we do because that was a key thing to do. I'm just sharing information, right? I'm
Yeah.
not bragging. I'm just like, can you believe this happened, everybody?
Yeah.
So it's having some excitement about what you're talking about, and it's infectious, right? People want to hear good things happened, right? They want to congratulate you instead of saying, well, we finally got to a decision. Oh,
Yes.
okay. That feels totally different to your manager, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, big deal. You have to make them understand why it's a big deal
Yes.
because they don't know. So
Yeah.
it's things like that or big I don't know if they're working with vendors or any of that kind of stuff, like helping a vendor get a breakthrough and move forward on something, or helping other business people understand the importance of what they're doing. Maybe they had an educational session
Yes.
about the project or about their work. Those are big wins. So I think we take for granted because it just comes natural to us. This is our job that we just
Yeah.
don't talk about it.
Yeah.
So every day, you probably have a win every single day. Just
Yes.
look at them and say, what are some things I can maybe even bundle together this week? Here's what happened so
Yeah.
that people can understand why it's a big deal.
Yes. That's so good. And it goes back to being able to connect. For example, like you said, decisions, if you help them, let's just say you use some new techniques, some new decision-making techniques, and it helped the team make those decisions faster. Of course, the outcome of that could be that for a project that size, on average, the project was completed or implemented faster than it typically would be, right? And
Yes.
being able to say a part of the reason why this project was able to be implemented faster than it normally would was because we were making decisions faster and more effectively. And this is the technique that I was leveraging to get us to make those faster decisions. So being able to connect the dots from what your contributions are to the overall project success can really go a long way in giving you kind of like that ammunition you'll need to show your contributions.
Can I share another one that was really funny? So I led an IT business analyst group, and the thing that was fun was someone would say, a business person would say, I want this feature, right? And so they would come back to me and say, Sue, they want this feature. And I'd say, well, did you ask a lot of questions about that? Because that feature could be, really tiny or really big, depending on how we build it.
Yeah.
And so they then thought about it like, okay, we'll go ask some more questions. Because I think what can happen is you might get to a place of having that next level conversation. And what you're going to build is a much smaller feature to do first. It takes less time to build and it's cheaper. Right? Who doesn't
Yes.
want to talk about having less money spent on a project?
Yeah.
So those are the types of things that I would always try to push my business analysts to think about. Now, I came from a business background, so I understood the business better than maybe they had had experience with. So I
Mhm.
wanted them to understand that we could ask the hard questions. We could say, is this really what you want? Because that is what this means. And,
Yeah.
in our world, the business ultimately paid for whatever it was they built, even though we were doing the work. So, of course, they want to save money too. So you have to help people understand you're asking for this, but maybe you only need something smaller. Is that really all you need? And they don't understand. So I think business analysts have the opportunity to help bring it to a level that they can understand it, what they're, connecting the dots, helping them understand the complexity of what they're asking for that they may not really understand. Those are big wins too, right? You're saving time, you're saving money. There's so many places I think business analysts can take advantage of to really show
Yeah.
the value that they're bringing.
Yeah, and that's so good to be able to be in a place to do that. And I think another helpful thing for business analysts is to have access and exposure to a wide variety of business analysis techniques, right? So
Mhm.
when you see situations like that where there might be a feature and there may not be a right amount of detail or you're not quite sure of the size, to have some understanding of what type of technique can I use to get what I need, to improve this feature or the understanding of this feature, right? So definitely kind of like a stretch goal for business analysts would be to increase their business analysis toolkit so that they can have the tools to leverage that can make those impacts down the line that could lead to that visibility.
And taking that toolbox and really owning it and going in with a lot of credibility. In my
Mhm.
experience, this is how we have looked at this in the past. When I've done projects of this size before, some of the things we look at are these. Like you are setting yourself up as a credible resource who's done this before, who
Yeah.
has ideas that matter. And it just changes the conversation with those stakeholders. I promise you, many stakeholders, although I love them, don't really know what they want. They just
No,
don't know what they want. And so you
no.
have to lead the conversation and help them understand what it is they really need. Even though they think they want the cool, fancy version, they're probably never
Yes.
going to use that.
Yes, exactly. And that's why it's important for us to know that we're not the order takers, right? We
Right.
are there to probe and elicit requirements, right? We're not, just there to give them what they want. We have to challenge that and make sure that they're aligned to some bigger strategic goal, right? Not just
Yeah.
because it looks cool or sounds cool, right?
Yeah. In my old times, we used to say, do you want the Cadillac version, which now would probably be something much more fancy than that. But it was like people would build the Cadillac version and then they would never use it. And then it was too complicated to use. So then they wouldn't adapt to the new system. And so I thought, this isn't a win at all. We built something that no one's going to use, and now they don't even like the system and they're complaining
Yeah,
about it. So that's not a win at all.
yeah.
So it's the long-term view of what you're doing and making sure that it is user friendly and that people enjoy the experience of using it and they want to do more with it. It's not just to build something fancy.
Unfortunately, in the times that we're in, a lot of the, traditional business analysis practices have been lost, just simply tying a requirement back to an objective and then tying that back
Mhm.
to a goal. That can just go such a long way with ensuring that we're getting the outcomes we initially wanted, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's let's do it agile, let's do it fast, but we still need to go back to our original goal to see, if what we're doing is aligned with what we want and if what we want is what we truly want, right? So just having those foundations, those core foundations can still add a lot of value in helping the organization reach their goal. and also gaining the visibility and doing that as well. So
And it has to
I
deliver business results, right? Because if
yes,
a project that has been approved and is going to deliver a certain business value and that has a certain ROI it has to meet, if you don't tap into those things and then it doesn't deliver the value, well, then that might be seen as a failure. It might be seen as a big miss. And of course,
yes,
people are looking to point fingers in a big miss of something
right,
that doesn't go well. So I
yeah.
think it's just really helpful to have it documented and kind of tick and tie all the things that you say it's going to do, that it does do that.
And that goes back to metrics, right? That success criterias or OKRs, whatever your project team
Hmm.
calls it. I train so many business analysts who say like, "Oh, well, we don't really, incorporate success measures or metrics because, the project manager doesn't want to include them because we might not hit it." It's like that's not doing anybody any good, right? If we're not hitting it, then we need to make adjustments to the product that we built so that we can hit it, right? Just measuring the project success or the product success can really help towards visibility and showing your impact as well. Because if
Yeah.
you can say, like, I was a business analyst who was on the project that allowed us to reduce turn times by 10% or reduce costs by 50%, that can go a long way, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it doesn't always have to be quantitative, it could also be qualitative as well.
Hmm.
Just having those built-in project measures, you can definitely increase your visibility and impact by having a clear connection between those metrics and the overall project success. So I tell the people that I train all the time, if you're not measuring the success of a project, then you're really doing yourself a disservice because it's not all about whether we hit it or we not. So like I said earlier, if you're underperforming, then it becomes the project team's responsibility to make the adjustments so that we can hit those metrics or those targets.
Totally agree.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about some pitfalls in terms of trying to gain visibility. What would you say are some mistakes that BAs or any professional make when they're trying to build their visibility that often can end up hurting them or backfiring?
I would advocate for them to try things that are to their strengths. So they might
Yeah.
try something that someone else is doing and they think, well, that person's doing it. I should try that. Let's go
Yeah.
back to what makes you unique, right? What makes you special and really lean into that because if you're trying to be like somebody else, you're not going to do it well anyway. So I think
Mm,
sometimes that can happen and it just, it doesn't go well. And then your confidence is taking a hit again. So, in my book, I have a bunch of ideas and I list them out by types of categories like your strengths or things that you might be doing, meeting with your
yeah.
manager, what do you do? Meeting with an influencer in the organization, what do you do? Because I want people to pick and choose what works for them. I want it to feel authentic and to be able to lean into something they're already good at and let's just make it better. It goes back to,
Yeah.
we used to all try to work on our weaknesses all the time, which was so fascinating. Now we've changed that, thank goodness, to say, like let's strengthen what we are already good at and then add to it instead of working on something that's really hard and not really our style anyway. Why bother?
Yeah. Can you give us like maybe one or two examples of the ones you have in the book that you could recommend for someone who's a business analyst or a similar role?
I mean, I went through the meetings, some of the meeting ones. So those are examples of what I share in the book for meetings. Let's just
Okay.
say that you're doing a one-on-one with your manager. So a lot of people will go in and say, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. Great.
Mhm.
But what if we change that a little bit? So you might say, we finished the documentation on this so and so project, and here's some of the big wins we got out of it, right? So I'm adding that
Mhm.
extra piece. Here are the big wins we had at, or here are
Yeah.
the things where I had a lot of influence and it
Yeah.
really worked. And I want to share that with you. So it's
Yeah.
kind of here's what I did and why it matters, or why it's valuable, or the impact that it made. So a lot of people don't use one-on-ones with their manager as effectively as I think that they could. And
Yeah.
those are opportunities for you to shine in front of the person who can have some influence over your career, of course. But I
Mm,
also want you to expand that to maybe their peers, who are your manager's peers, who are other people in the organization that you can get in front of and talk about the things that you're doing on your project or the decisions that you've made, you have an opportunity to kind of build a group of people that are big fans, and you
Yeah.
want to encourage that and keep doing it. So those are just a few things where I think people are not meeting with enough influencers and networking internally, are not taking advantage of time with their manager and leveraging it to a place where it really shows that you're making a difference and how valuable you are. We just tend to kind of dismiss it because we're good at it. And so I really want to change the way people think about that and say, I'm not bragging, I'm just talking about the things I did and how amazing.
That is so good because I think many professionals feel like they're even when they do have those one-on-ones with a manager, they kind of use that as kind of like a complaining session where they're talking about
Mm,
all the things that went wrong,
yeah.
how they're being victimized, right? And lots of time to complain to your manager. But I love your point of using that time to help demonstrate your thought process, how you're adding value to the projects. This is what you did. And these are the positive results like that. Because, like I mentioned in another podcast, you know, managers or leaders love employees that make their life easier. So
Right.
if you go into your one on one saying, this is what I did this week to make your life easier. I solved this problem. I helped facilitate this decision so that it didn't have to get escalated to you. They're going to love that. But if you're coming in saying, this person did this, that person did that, and blah, 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 and
This
somebody's
isn't
got to do something,
working.
this isn't working, that means that it's something that's going to get escalated to them and it's another task on their already busy agenda. So if you can demonstrate how you are mitigating things from being put on their plate, they're going to be like, yeah, this is definitely somebody that I need to one, keep around for a while, or two, elevate to a promotion.
Yeah, we learned, we had a class one time and it was mind blowing to me, of course. But one of the things she taught us was that treat your manager as if it's your client. And I
Yeah,
thought, of course, because I'm doing all these things for our clients, no problem. But if you think about your manager that way, you show up differently, right? How can I give information to them in a way that they can hear it? How can I make sure that I'm taking care of something that would make it easier for them? You would do it for a client.
yeah,
So if you go in with that mindset with your manager, I think it can go a long way and help. The relationship between you is much better. I always felt like I had an opportunity to be kind of the right-hand person of my
mhm,
manager if I wanted to be. And so when you take that advantage and try to do that, you learn a lot of information from your manager informally, of course. And so the more you can be a trusted advisor to a
yeah,
manager, it helps you, right? It just helps you get more visibility. They send you to more things, they give you new
yes.
opportunities. So these are things that are not always tangible, that you can't expect to happen, but they can happen if you put yourself in the right position to get them.
Yeah, that's so amazing. Even my sister, she had recently gotten a promotion, and she was just saying that they're giving her more responsibility to speak with like outside clients and vendors and
Mhm.
things like that. So they're putting her out there and making her more visible outside of just her office, right? So I'm like, well, that's good because it shows that they're actually trusting you with their brand, right? They
Yes.
wouldn't let anybody represent them. So if they're seeing you as someone that um they're comfortable representing them, that's definitely a step in the right direction. So keep doing what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this yesterday for another call I was on, but I got thrown into the deep end in very early on in my career for meetings that I would never have been given the right to go to. And
Mhm.
I had a really impressive director who said, Sue, I'm going to put you on a, she was so funny. I'm putting you on a plane to go to Dover, Delaware to our chocolate plant, and I want you to sit in on this meeting. And I said, well, what are they going to ask me? I mean, I was pretty junior, honestly. And she said, whatever they ask you, I'm sure you can answer. Don't worry about it. And literally, that's all I got before I got
Yeah.
there. So,
Yeah.
so it puts you in these positions of being uncomfortable, but knowing you're going to figure it out. And so
Yes.
I think being uncomfortable has to be something you get more used to. It's
Yes.
never the perfect place, right, for you to show up. So you just have to take these opportunities. And I took that one and many more that she gave me, and it really helped me, be able to move up in the organization. So think about the relationships you're building, the opportunities you're getting, and how can you leverage them to do something that shows your value.
Yeah, and I want to double click on that for a moment. Being uncomfortable, making a practice of being uncomfortable, right? Because
Mm.
I think being uncomfortable is a sign of growth. Like if
Mhm.
everything you're doing, you're comfortable with it, it shows that you're just doing repetitive things, you're not growing, you're not elevating. So doing things that, you're a little uncomfortable with is such a good sign of growth. Different projects that you're uncomfortable with, talking to different stakeholders that you might be uncomfortable with, even using, for a BA, it might just be even using a different technique that you haven't used before that
Yep.
might be a little more technical or a little more, I don't know, data oriented or something of that nature, right? Just stretching yourself a little bit and being uncomfortable can really go a long way to elevate your career, because that's kind of like what it means, right? To get promoted, to elevate it, to stretch. So obviously you have to start learning how to put yourself in a position to do different things if you want a different role or an elevated role, right? So I think
Yeah.
having that mindset, that growth mindset of doing things that are a little uncomfortable. Even I heard like little things like changing your morning routine just a little bit or taking a slightly different route to work can
Mm.
kind of step into that growth mindset as well.
I mean, I think about that example I gave you, but that put me in front of people that from corporate, right? That became people that I worked with later on in my life. And I had no idea
Mhm.
that was going to happen. So I think what helps me as as a coach now or as a consultant when I go into companies, I can go into any company. I don't even have to understand what you do as a business, but
Yes,
I can see the gaps. I can see the opportunities for the people. I can start to understand and put the pieces together because I worked in multiple functions at Kraft. I can put the pieces together. And that's what a business analyst does, right? You're putting the pieces together of any project that you're working on or any system that you might be doing something on. You're doing that. So the more you do that, these are repetitions. The repetitions you get are just going to build confidence and make you more comfortable in those uncomfortable situations where you're doing something in a new industry or something different. You
yes,
just go in with like, you know what? I figured it out before. I'm going to figure it out this time too.
that's
It's
it.
all good.
And that is such a strong comment because, especially for business analysts who are like contractors where every 6 months they're going to a different
Mhm.
organization. If you have that mindset, it takes a lot of the fear out. It doesn't matter if it's a hospital, an automobile company or a mortgage company, whatever organization it is, I can go in. I've got my pillars, my foundations of business analysis skills. I can figure it out. I can
Yep.
learn it. I can figure out things or figure out ways to improve that organization. It doesn't matter what organization it is. It doesn't matter what industry it is. So that's a really good mindset that can really go a long way in someone's career for sure.
Yeah, I just want to add one piece to that. It's about having self-trust and
Yeah.
understanding that you have done a lot of things. Again, it goes back to that value that you've already done in your career and you bring to a different experience and recognizing and holding on to that because you might feel in the beginning, oh, you might have some doubts. I don't understand this industry. I don't understand this project that well. They're going to ask me a question I don't have the answer to. I think it's
Mhm.
okay to recognize that you're new at it. That's where a little imposter syndrome shows up. But
Yeah.
imposter syndrome is also about growth. It's helping you learn, it's helping you try something new. And the more actions you take, it pushes imposter syndrome into the background. It can't survive when you're taking action. So
Yeah.
I would always lean into what have I done before, like my own leadership experience, my own trust in myself, and I'll just share a quick example. One time I went into a group of people and it was like a retreat that we were doing, and I'd never met them, didn't know anything much about their company, to be honest. I had a plan. I talked to the president and stuff and had a plan. But when I got in there, I just went into this place of trust of myself. And I don't even
Mm.
know, like there were questions I asked. I never thought about them the moment before I asked them, but they were the right question to ask at that moment. And so I
Yeah.
think just much like a coach can have a little bit of intuition about a question to ask, I think business analysts would have the same because
Yeah.
you're always thinking about what are the impacts that could happen or what are the things we need to think about for the long term or what's the short term implication of this. So trusting that you will know what to ask in these moments of uncomfortableness can
Yeah.
really serve you well.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a really important skill. And the one of the terms I try to emphasize with people that I train is context. You
Mm,
don't have to be in the same exact situation every time to know what to do. Sometimes you can just do something similar, but it's in a different context and the intuition will come like you said, right? So knowing how to do different activities but also put them in a particular context so that it's more optimized, right? So yeah, that's a
yeah.
very important skill, as anyone who is interested in just being elevated in their career. Okay, so I know you have a lot of different testimonials from people who have read the Visibility Factor book or taking the Visibility Factor program. But can you share a client example of someone who went from invisible to getting promoted and talk a little bit about the shift that they took that facilitated that?
So, when I was writing the book, one of the things that we do when we write a book is we actually test drive the material, they call it. And
Mhm.
so I put together a group of people that were not from the same company necessarily. There were some that were and some that weren't. And it was 11 people, I think. And so I took them through this process that I have in the book called RISE, which is reflect, ideate, select, and evaluate. And it's about helping you understand why you want to be visible. And
Mm,
so none of those people had heard a thing about visibility before they walked into my little online class for 4 weeks. And it was really fascinating. I walked them through why it's important, much like what I've shared here today, and that you need to be doing it. And so I gave them little homework in between of to try things. And so I'll use the example of 3 people that were with the same company, all at the same level. And they were excited to try that visibility partnership, for example, and to try to start to do things where they talk differently and position themselves as being ready for the next thing. And
mhm.
so each one of them has been promoted twice since that class, and that was only 4 years
Wow.
ago.
Wow.
So that is what I think is the power of visibility that people just don't understand. And that's why I'm trying to spread this message to as many people as possible because
Yes.
imagine if everybody could be in the room and share their ideas, or if they felt comfortable enough to speak up, or they had the opportunity to talk about other people's successes, right? It's like tide raises all boats, right? If we can all raise each other up and be able to leverage that and not be competitive with each other, but how can we help each other shine? It goes a
Yeah.
long way in helping someone see that you're ready for the next step. Because, of course, as you climb, you're going to be leading people. So they need
Yeah,
to know that you're going to
absolutely.
be a good, supporter of people. So that's just one great example of that. I mean, I have so many. I've taught that class a million times now. And well, not really a million, but it feels like sometimes where I feel like I'm teaching it and teaching the same things. And every time it's this mind blowing experience for people who have
Yeah.
had no idea. So, yeah, the book has got a lot of great ideas. I think when you're doing it live, it helps. But I think it's also just being open to the fact that you can do something different and really make a difference for yourself.
Awesome. Awesome. And I know for you to write such an awesome book, you probably had your own struggles with visibility, right? You had to,
Yeah.
hopefully. So can you just tell us a little bit about what your journey was? I know you mentioned earlier that you did have some struggles, but can you just talk a little bit about your own journey with feeling invisible and how you overcame that?
Sure. Yeah. I was this person who was in IT as a director, and I was considered a top talent. I got put in this elite leadership program, right? So, from the outside view, things are golden for me. But internally, I do not have an IT degree. I have a management and marketing degree. So, internally, I would look at that table of people in my leadership team and think they know way more than I do. I don't have anything that I could possibly contribute to that. So I sat in the back of the room. I didn't participate. I didn't add any value at all. The things I'm telling you to do, I was not doing right at that point. And so someone
But
gave me
you were
feedback, which is, I'm
sorry to
sorry.
interrupt, but it sounds like you were physically making yourself invisible,
Exactly.
right?
Literally in the back of the room. Literally,
Literally,
for sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah. And then I had a mentor. So this is chapter 1 of the book, who shared with me, hey, you're being invisible. You come to meetings, you don't add any value, you're not participating, you're being invisible. Why do you even come? So remember, before that, I am this top talent. And now I hear this and think, do I have a career anymore? I don't know. So I'm really
wow,
grateful that she told me that. But I got a little defensive, I'm not going to lie, when she said that to me. And I thought, what is happening? How did I get here? I don't understand. So I went and met with another mentor of mine and said, here's the feedback I just got. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know what do you do to just be visible, right? And she
right, yeah,
said, and she told me, much like I've shared here, like, you have a role to play, you have something to share, and you need to do it. And what was killing me, and I didn't think about it at the moment when she gave me this feedback, was that I was not only making myself invisible, I was making my team invisible. So what happens to
wow,
an invisible team? They're no
wow,
longer needed in an organization. So
mhm,
that about killed me, to think I was not only hurting myself. That's one decision I've made, but now I've made a decision that hurts them too. That's not fair.
right,
So that was my story. And so I set off on this course with that pivotal moment of, how can I be visible without bragging, making sure it's authentic to me, and really taking these lessons and embracing them and starting to do more with them. So then I had my team. Well, the first thing I did was I went and sat at that executive table, the one that I was scared to sit at. I went and sat there,
nice.
which they all came in and looked at me like, why is she why is she sitting at the table? What's happening right now? Because then one of them is no
What are
longer
you
sitting at
doing?
the
Yeah,
table, right? And then
yeah,
I had my team come sit at the table and I had them present, and they were nervous to do that. But I said, I'm right here. We have to be visible. And that means sitting at this table and demonstrating physically that we are here and we're in it and we're going to make a difference. And so those are things that now I've worked with many, many clients on, through all of their challenges, whatever those may be. But it's about believing that you belong at that table. And
yeah,
sometimes we don't believe it for ourselves. We need someone else to believe it. So I gave that belief I had in my team to them. And then now I do the same thing with clients. I want them to believe that they can do this. And sometimes we need to borrow someone else's belief, for us to be able to
yes,
step out of our comfort zone, right? And do it. So
yeah,
that's my story. And so writing the book was really interesting because that had happened many years before, but I had to go back to that time, be in that moment of hearing that feedback and how did that feel and what did I experience. And so it was a bit of therapy. I'm not going to lie, writing this book in some ways, because I had to relive all of those things that I actually thought I had gotten past. I had to go through
yeah,
them again and really work on, why did that happen and how did I feel? So it took me a little longer to write because of that, because I was still holding on to this, I'm perfect, I know how to do everything. Nobody knew I was experiencing all those things. So for anybody who
right,
reads the book that worked with me back then, they're surprised, because I
yeah,
never told anybody that I
yeah.
was struggling with all those things. So that's my story.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure.
T- I've got a couple more questions for you, but for our audience members who want to learn more about you, how can they reach you?
So you can go to my website, which is susanmbarber.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I would love to connect with any of you. Let me know that you heard me on the show and that you were really excited about something I shared, something that helped you. I'd love to know what really made a difference for you, because I really, like I said earlier, want everyone to be able to embrace this visibility world and step into it in a bigger way.
Awesome. And we'll be sure to add all that information down below in the description. All right, so let's talk about some final takeaways. So, what is one mind shift that you think that every, of course, business analyst, but just any professional who wants to go from overlooked to outstanding, what type of mind shift do you think they need to make?
One of the things I tell every person I meet is that every interaction you have is an opportunity for visibility. And so I would love for you to think about it that way. Every conversation you have, how can you work in something that you're doing? How can you share a project that you're proud of? How can you talk about a strength if they need help with something? Say, you know what? I don't know if you know this, but I'm really good at that. I'd love to help you. I'm just offering to help, right? I'm not bragging that I have this strength. I'm just offering to help you. So think about ways that you can, I call it, weave in to a conversation some
Yeah.
things that you want them to know about you, because we all get to create our own, what I call, a narrative
Yeah.
about ourselves. And then that narrative that we create about ourselves is what we share with others. And then they take it and it becomes their narrative about us. So think about what you're sharing. If you're, like we talked about earlier, if you're just going in and complaining and you're
Mhm.
complaining about every other person, well, what's the narrative they have about you? She's a complainer. She doesn't
Yes.
solve problems. She doesn't know how to deal with, challenges. That's not the narrative you want. So you have to really show up with the narrative you want to be and talk about things in the best way so that people can hear that from you too.
Wow, that is so good. That yes, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. Awesome. Okay, so any final thoughts for anyone who wants to break out of invisibility or maybe step into advancing their role or leadership roles, even if they don't have a particular title yet?
I mean, I think it's just it is mindset. To your point earlier, it's a decision that you make to start taking actions that are a little out of your comfort zone. You can even listen to my podcast, which is also called the Visibility Factor. I have, I
Awesome.
think, 175 episodes or something now. So I talk about the same thing all the time. And if there's something you can learn, if you need ideas, you can listen to a podcast and get it. You can read my blog and get it. I have a LinkedIn newsletter. There's ideas everywhere that I use. And every day someone talks to me about something. And when they talk about something that's different, I want to share it with other people. So I use those vehicles as a way to do that. And I have a new workbook coming out in October, which is helping people learn how to do some of these things, how to talk about these things. So if you want ideas, or if you want to send me a message on LinkedIn and say, "Hey, here's my challenge. Do you have an idea?" I'm happy to give you an idea. I really am. I want you to have an idea. I don't want you to stay stuck. So you have opportunities to leverage whatever I have, let's put it that way, that will help you. And hopefully you'll go back and listen to this episode again from Michael, because you're going to pick up something else that maybe we talked about that you missed the first time. And you can leverage all of these things. And one thing I want to share is I don't want people to feel overwhelmed. It might feel like I'm telling you a lot and you have to do it all. Just pick one or two things. Just start small, one or two things, and try it and see if you like it. If it doesn't feel like you, pick something else. You don't have to do any of these things forever. You get to decide. And if it feels good to you, keep doing it. If you're getting good feedback on it, keep doing it. But don't do things that don't really work for you, because you're just going to sabotage and you're going to stop and you're not going to be continuing to stay visible. So it doesn't serve you to keep trying something that's, really not fun.
Awesome. Make the decision. I love it.
Right. Hmm.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Susan, for being an advocate for the community in the realm of visibility. And thank you so much for being here today. It was so wonderful talking to you, and I'm looking forward to doing it again sometime.
Oh, I would love to. I love our conversation. I love all you low BAs out there. So go be visible. Go make it happen. They need to hear from you. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much.